Hey you guys, what's up? In today's video, I'm going to be ranking all of the new eyeshadow palettes that I have tried recently. I have a bunch of new palettes to share with you guys. You guys have already seen a bunch of reviews on these. I have like the Animal Crossing palettes, the new Natasha Denona Mini Love palette, a bunch of the new palettes that have come out recently. So yeah, I hope you guys all enjoyed today's video. Please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you're not already. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So I did go ahead and rank these like in number order. We're not going to do like categories or anything. We're just going to start from my least favorite and then go to my favorite palette that I've tried out recently. Just because these are at like the bottom of the list does not mean that they're bad palettes necessarily. I've tried a lot of good palettes recently, so it was a little bit of a challenge to put these in like a numerical order. So yeah, we're just going to start out at the bottom of my list. And the first palette we're going to be talking about that is at the bottom of my list is the ColourPop Wine and Only palette. Now, I love a good like burgundy or pink red toned eye look, but this palette is just not it for me. It's very hard to create a look with this palette. I just feel like this was missing some lighter shades. Maybe just like one lighter shade would have made me like this palette more. The formula of these, of course, is amazing. I love the ColourPop eyeshadow formula. The mattes are very pigmented, blend out beautifully. The shimmery shades are like super metallic. I don't like dislike this palette. I just feel like it's missing something. So that is why it's at the bottom of my list. And then the next palette that comes right above the wine palette is another ColourPop palette. And this is the ColourPop Ballad palette. This is a really pretty kind of like cool toned smoky palette, and the reason that this is at the bottom of my list is because it only has one matte shade in it, which is the shade right here, and I just don't find myself reaching for this palette. The only shade that I've been using a ton is this like champagne shade right here called Novel. This is a gorgeous, like super metallic, kind of like white champagne shade. I've been using that shade a ton, so I do like the palette for this shade. And then the shade Epic right here, which is like the matte shade, is also good, but these other three shades, I just don't use those, and I cannot see myself using those shades. This is not a bad palette. The color story is just not my favorite, and I don't really like the matte shades with glitter in them. Not my favorite type of shade for in the crease. I have an entire video where I tested out each of these new little ColourPop palettes, and I did an eye look with each individual palette. I'll have it up here in the cards or something if you guys want to watch that. But yeah, this one just had to be at the bottom of my list because I do not find myself reaching for that palette. The next palette is also another ColourPop palette. I've been trying out a bunch of ColourPop palettes recently, so that is why there are so many in this ranking video. And it is one of the Animal Crossing palettes. This is the What a Hoot palette. So while I think that this is a really pretty palette, perfect for kind of like every day, I just feel like they kind of missed the mark as well with this one. Just like the wine one, like I feel like the brown in here is a little bit too deep to kind of blend with this lighter shade. I wish they would have done more of a medium brown in this palette, but it is a really pretty palette. Like all of the shades in here are gorgeous. The glitter in here is stunning. I love both of the lid shades, and I do like the palette. I like the formula, but this one is just not one that I could see myself reaching for in the future. That is why it is more towards the bottom of my list. And then the next palette we have is also another ColourPop palette. This is the Lyric palette, which is another mini palette. There's actually like nothing that I dislike about this palette. I actually like the like color story of the palette. I feel like it's pretty different from some other types of palettes that I own. Like this isn't a color that I would normally like gravitate towards, but this one out of all of the new palettes that I've tried recently just like doesn't stand out in my mind. The glitter shade in here is beautiful, and so is this shade right here called Melody. Beautiful shades, love the matte shades. Not the biggest fan of like this brown type metallic shade, but this is a really pretty palette. But I don't know, this one just doesn't like stand out compared to some of the other palettes that I've tried recently. That is why it's lower on the list. Now, as I said, I don't like dislike any of these palettes, so they're just lower on my list because I don't really stand out, or I just don't really see myself using them that often, or I haven't been reaching for them that often. Coming in at number 12, I guess I should have been numbering these the entire time, we have the Too Faced Be My Lover palette, which is my most recent like review on an eyeshadow palette. And this is a good palette, but compared to some of these other palettes, it's just not as good, and it is a little bit more expensive than most of these other palettes that are on my list here. So I love the packaging of this palette. I think the packaging is so cute, and the shades are also really pretty as well. But honestly, this is another palette that just doesn't like stand out compared to some of the other palettes that have come out recently. I hate the scent of this. I do not like the scent of rose. Like rose scented things, I hate it. Like the scent literally like makes me nauseous. So I just don't like the smell of this. It smells terrible. I don't know why they did that. The shades are really pretty and I do like the formula, but for $27 you can get like a few ColourPop palettes, so that's why this one is lower on my list. Next up we have the new Buxom White Russian palette. I've actually been finding myself reaching for this a lot more than I thought that I would. This does have 2 blush shades and then 6 eyeshadow shades. I love that they included 2 blush shades in this palette, and I love both of the shades in here. These aren't going to flatter like every skin tone though, so I feel like they could have done a little bit better with the variety. But I do really like the shades of eyeshadows in this palette. They are perfect for every day. I've been using this shade a ton actually, which is just like a matte kind of cream shade all over the lid, and I've really been liking that shade a lot. And then I've also been using this shade right here in the crease. These shimmery shades in here are also really pretty. Let me show you guys those on the finger. I feel like this Buxom palette has definitely been really good. I haven't been the biggest fan of Buxom palettes in the past, and I've really been enjoying this one. So yeah, I would recommend this one to you guys. It is a nice overall palette if you just want a few eyeshadow shades and then some blush shades. This is like the perfect kind of palette for every day. So yeah, I've been really enjoying this one actually, and I didn't expect to, so that one was like pleasantly surprising. Next up we have the ColourPop Hello Kitty and Friends palette. This was like a holiday launch, I believe. Oh my gosh, mine is such a mess. I have literally eyeshadow all over this palette. I actually really like this palette. I know a lot of people like didn't really like it that much. I thought this was a beautiful palette. I love the formula of these. This purple like shimmery shade, I love that shade in this palette. The mattes are really good. They blend out beautifully. The pigmentation is great. I love the color story. I feel like you can create so many different looks with this palette. That's why this one is higher up on my list. I've really been enjoying this one recently, and the packaging of this is so cute. So we're about halfway through my new eyeshadow palettes ranking list. I think we're at number 9. And next up we have the ColourPop Amore palette, which is another one of the mini palettes. This one is like the berry toned palette, and I do really enjoy the shades in this palette, but this is just another palette that didn't really like stand out that much to me compared to some of the other palettes that I've tried recently. That's why it's kind of just towards like the middle of the list. Like I love the shades in here. I think the color is really pretty, but I just don't really find myself reaching for this one compared to some of the other new palettes that I have that are also in this same kind of like color story, like berry type shades. So yeah, I think this is a really nice palette, but I think there are better palettes out there, and I'm going to show you guys some other really good palettes that are towards the top of my list that are like the same kind of color as this one. So that's why this one is just kind of like in the mid range of my list, because it just doesn't really stand out that much. Next up we have another Animal Crossing palette. This is the 5-Star Island palette, which is the pink palette, and this one is such a cute palette. I actually really like this one a lot. I love this pink matte shade right here, and then surprisingly I did really enjoy this shade right here that is a matte with glitter in it. I love the color of it, and I was able to get over my hatred of the glitter in the matte shadow with the shade. I thought it was so pretty. And then this glitter shade is stunning, and then I love the yellow as well. This is a really good palette. Not my favorite color story, that's why it's lower on the list, but I think it is a really pretty one. Next up we have the ColourPop Cherish palette, which is like the kind of like reddish toned palette. I thought this was a really good one from this collection. I love that this one has like 3 matte shades. This matte shade does have glitter, but it does blend out. These blend out beautifully, and I love this lid shade right here called Destiny. This is another stunning like champagne shade that is perfect for all over the lid. So yeah, I've been really enjoying this palette. This one stands out more than the other like love story palettes. I feel like this one is really good. Then coming in at number 6, we have the final ColourPop like mini palette, and this one is the Crush palette. This one was my favorite palette from this collection. It has 3 true matte shades with no glitter in them, and then we do have a matte with glitter in it. This one had the most mattes in the palette, and I think that's why I like this palette so much, because I feel like I can create a lot of different looks with it. I feel like this one is definitely the best out of these little mini palettes that ColourPop has. So yeah, that is why this one is the highest on my list out of those. I've been really enjoying that one. All right, so now we are at the top 5 of the palettes that I've tried out recently. The next one is an Animal Crossing palette from ColourPop, and it is the purple palette. This is the La Belle of the Ball palette, and this one is just such a pretty purple palette. Whenever I saw the like Instagram photos of this collection before I got it in the mail, I was most drawn to this purple palette. I think it's such a pretty palette. Like the purple glitter in here is such a pretty shade. It's like an icy lavender, and it is so pretty. And then I love the 2 purple matte shades in this palette. I think this one is a really great one. So if you guys were able to get your hands on this one whenever this collection came out, you're going to love it. This one is a really good one. Then at number 4, we have the last ColourPop Animal Crossing palette, and it is the Nook Ink palette. This palette took me by surprise. I did not expect to love this one as much as I do. This one is like the green, kind of like teal turquoise palette. I don't even know what to really call it. I have the shimmery shade right here in my inner corner. Then I have these 2 shades on my lower lash line, and I have been loving this palette. I did not expect to like this one so much, and I love it. Let me just show you guys on my finger. Like, these shades are amazing. I really hope some of you guys were able to get your hands on this palette because I know so many of you wanted to pick it up, and this stuff did sell out so quick. So if you guys also were able to get your hands on this one, you're going to love it. It's seriously so good. Then coming in at number 3, we have the new BH Cosmetics Lunar New Year palette. I feel like this palette is such a good deal for the price. This is a $21 palette. It has 21 gorgeous shades in it. I love the shades in here. I think that these are stunning. They swatch beautifully. They go on the eyes beautifully. The mattes are so pretty. I love the green shade in here called Money. Like, I love the color story of this palette. The only bad thing is that the reds do blend out kind of pink, so just keep that in mind if you guys are eyeing this palette. But I really have been enjoying this palette a lot. Like, I love this shimmery shade right here. Oh my gosh, these are so good. Honestly, BH Cosmetics has amazing quality shadows. So yeah, I have been loving this palette. I have an entire review video on this. I'll have it up in the cards or something if you guys want to check it out. But yeah, now we are down to the final 2 palettes in my ranking, and I'm so excited to talk about both of these. So this one might be a surprise, like that it's at number 2 and not number 1, and it is the Natasha Denona Mini Love palette. Honestly, I have been loving this palette so much. I am wearing 4 out of the 5 shades right now on my eyes, like in my inner corner, outer corner, in my crease. I love this palette. The Natasha Denona matte formula is honestly one of the best that I've ever tried. This was my first Natasha Denona purchase, so I have been obsessed with this palette. I love the color story of this palette. These are just so beautiful. Let me just show you guys some on the fingers. I also have an entire review video on this collection. If you guys want to watch that, make sure to go and check it out. I have swatches of all of these shades on my arm. I did an eye look with these shades. But yeah, I have been obsessed with this palette. The formula is amazing. I think this was $25. Definitely worth the $25, even though the pans are pretty small. I am obsessed with this palette, and this one was almost my number 1, but the palette that I do have at number 1 is very similar to this one, a lot cheaper, and has pretty much the same shades. That is why I just had to put this one at number 1. And it is the ColourPop Menage a Moi palette. I have such a hard time saying that. I have been obsessed with this palette lately. This is my number 1 eyeshadow palette that I have tried out recently. I have been using this non-stop. I have some of these shades in my crease as well. Love the ColourPop formula. Look at these 2 palettes. Like, I feel like they're very similar. If you guys can't afford $25 for this little mini palette, just get this one. I think they have this one at Ulta. I'll link it in my description box below, but I know it's a lot cheaper than the Natasha Denona one, and it's really good, and the colors are very similar, and this one has more shades in here. But yeah, every time I've been doing my makeup, I've just found myself reaching for this palette. I think this is such a beautiful color story. If you love pink, kind of like mauve-y berry tone shadows, you will love this palette. It has a really good amount of mattes and shimmer shades. These shimmers in here are stunning. It has glitter shades, matte shades that are light, medium, deep. You can create so many different looks with this palette, and I have been obsessed with it. So yeah, I had to put this one at number 1, even though I really wanted to do this one, but I feel like this one gives you more shades, cheaper, very similar, and I've been reaching for this one a little bit more, so that's why I put that one at number 1. So let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. What palettes have you guys been loving lately? I would love to hear what palettes are at the top of your list, so make sure to comment them down below. So yeah, I hope you guys all enjoyed today's video. If you did, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you're not already. Also, make sure you have your notifications turned on, that way you don't miss out on any of my future videos. All you have to do is click the bell next to the subscribe button, and then you'll receive a notification every time I upload a new video. And I will see you guys in my next video. Thank you so much for watching.